Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you on this Monday. So much to get to here on the show. We'll chat with home team Brandon Leak. Certainly has been a rough weekend for Atlanta sports fans. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Also, Jamie Bradford of the JB and Goldwater Show will join us. We'll talk some South Carolina football with him. And then Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com, recently put out a book called The Hidden History of Clemson Football. We'll talk Clemson and Georgia with him coming up in the final hour of the program as we enter the All-Star break for Major League Baseball, BJ. I mean, it really couldn't have ended on a worse note. I mean, you took 2 out of 3 from the Marlins. You played a little bit better baseball, but at the end of the day, you lose Ronald Acuna Jr. for the season, torn ACL. I know we were all chatting from the show this weekend, and it was like, as soon as I put in there, Acuna's done, carted him off the field, everybody's like, oh boy. And you see that, and at first you think, okay, maybe there's hope. He tries to walk off, can't do it. You see the tears in his face, and then you have to bring the cart out to get him off the field. You're like, that's not a, hey, you'll bounce back after the All-Star break kind of thing, and it wasn't, and that's just crushing if you're a Braves fan to have that happen, man. It's, look, you know me, BJ, I'm the most upbeat guy there is. You take a top 5 guy out of the roster on top of everything else that's going on with this team, that is a gut punch, man. I mean, it is just one of the best players in baseball. You can't replace that. You're like, well, maybe we can. No. You cannot replace that. If you could, then everybody would just go out and have, mega stars on their team. But there isn't but one Mike Trout. There's only one Ronald Acuna Jr. There's only one Fernando Tatis Jr. That's why those guys are so invaluable, man. And that was to see that just put a damper on everything. And I know you enter the All-Star break, 4.5 out, and you're like, that's not that bad. And I think under normal considerations, BJ, you might be saying, all right, maybe the Braves should try to, hammer down and go for it. But now you have questions about Ian Anderson. I think we'll know more tomorrow, according to folks, about what his shoulder looks like. Your entire outfield is now gone from opening day. Your starting catcher is gone. You've lost multiple pitchers in and out of the injured list. I mean, this is a rough shape baseball team right now, and not a lot to be excited about coming out of the All-Star break the way that thing ended.
Yeah, just devastating news regarding Acuna, and I think we all feel terrible for Ronald. When you think about what he means to this team, what he means to baseball, I agree with you, one of the 5 best players in all of Major League Baseball, regardless of position. A guy that is a joy to watch. To see him go down, to see him in pain, to see the emotion. Tried to come back out and had the tears in his eyes. I mean, that was just really difficult to watch. And first and foremost, you wish him the best. Here's to a speedy recovery. In terms of the impact on the team, I think you're 100% right, Kevin, and it's unfortunate. It's difficult to verbalize, to say, to think about, but you cannot replace Ronald Acuna. It cannot happen. And I know there are a lot of talking points about, well, what could you do to the lineup? What can you do around the trade deadline? Could you bring in this guy? Could you bring in that guy? Could you bring up this guy? Could you bring up that guy? Well, none of that is going to replicate Ronald Acuna in terms of his production, in terms of what he means to the team. Just brutal. And look, I think the Braves, you still have Freddie Freeman and Ozzie Albies and Austin Riley in that lineup, but it's absolutely impossible to replace Ronald Acuna. And you wish him the best. Normally when you talk about an ACL, anywhere from 7 to 9 months, I guess, in terms of the recovery process. And I have no doubt that he's going to come back, as good as ever. But in terms of the here and now with the Braves lineup, there's nothing you can do to replace Ronald Acuna. And you were able to score some runs yesterday. You gave up 7 and you lost. But, Kevin, how does this kind of, if at all, change your frame of reference with this team where we are here at the All-Star break? You have the trade deadline coming up. I know a lot of potential storylines there, but this team is just running out of options. You talk about Ian Anderson potentially, being hurt, and to go along with Acuna being out is just devastating. And I feel terrible for Ronald. I know all the Braves country was just kind of heartbroken when you saw him in pain and saw the tears. But you have Adrianza. He's been a a real benefit to your lineup. You have obviously Heredia has been a real benefit to your lineup. We still haven't seen a ton of Inciarte, but there's just nothing you can do to replace Ronald Acuna. And I think the trade deadline, while a lot of people might say, oh, you can get this guy and that guy, even if you add somebody, it's not going to be Ronald Acuna. It's not going to be anywhere close to Ronald Acuna. So you're in a really difficult spot.
Yeah, I think we have a comment here. We encourage folks to comment there on our Facebook, Twitter feeds, YouTube page. Ben Anderson saying just means Alex Anthopoulos in the front office will have to make, I'm assuming he meant smarter deals. He said scouter, but I'm assuming he meant smarter deals because you still have a chance. Look, and I think that's the conversation, BJ, that the front office is having is, yeah, 4.5 games is right there. You still have a chance. But let's be real about what you have to replace. There isn't a Ronald Acuna you can trade for. There just isn't. Your entire outfield is different from opening day. And while I appreciate Guillermo Heredia and Ehire Adrianza, they're not the same thing as Ronald Acuna Jr., Marcell Ozuna, and if you're only missing center field, I'd say, yeah, you're absolutely right. But you're missing your entire outfield. Your catching situation has been a mess. You have Jonathan Lucroy, who's a veteran guy. Kevin Smith, your young prospect, William Contreras, just needs more seasoning, and so he got sent back down. We might have a Shea Langeliers sighting at some point if it gets that way. But, BJ, I think that is the discussion that the Braves are having here at the All-Star break is Ben says you have a chance. Ben Anderson commented, says you still have a chance. I think you're evaluating how much of a chance you have with no Mike Soroka on the horizon. You really have to start looking at whether or not you're getting Huascar Ynoa back anytime soon. What's the injury status of your catching situation? And do you really have a chance? Is the roster as it's constituted going to stay in it? I don't think so. Is the roster as constituted with a piece added, one piece, going to stay in it? I don't know. And so when you're starting to talk about saying, look, we really could use 2 outfield bats now because Acuna's out and we could use another starting. I mean, you're talking 2-3 good pieces you're going to have to get. I mean, there's being smart and there's being correct 100% of the time. And look, I would be more pressed to say, let me hang on to some of these guys I have plans for that I think can play, as opposed to trying to go all in to get there now. I know those opportunities are rare, but I really think you need so much right now on this roster that, again, I made the comment to you guys yesterday. Look, and Ben commented back, said, if you can get a couple of outfielders, you absolutely do. Okay, then I appreciate that, but BJ, I'll let you go in. A couple of outfielders from where and who? I mean, Joey Gallo would be a great one. That's one. Who'd you give up to get him? Now you still need another one. You probably could use a catcher, a starting pitcher to help you get there if Ian Anderson's injury turns out to be more than what's kind of suggested. So I'm not saying you can't get one. Getting 2 outfielders from 2 non-contending teams for what they want, I think you have to depend on if it's worth it or not.
Yeah, and I certainly understand the desire, right? Because you look at this Braves team, and you're only 4.5, whatever it is, games out behind the Mets, and I believe you still have 11 games left against the Mets. So you're not in a situation where you're one of these teams where you're 10 games under 500, or you're a dozen games out in the division. But I do think when you look forward, it's hard to be optimistic, and I understand what Ben is saying, sending us some Facebook messages. I know there are some guys with the Mariners and guys with the Diamondbacks and guys with the Rangers, some teams that are struggling that might be pieces that could make you better. I certainly understand, right? We've seen some of those names, guys like Ketel Marte potentially from the Diamondbacks, David Peralta, but what my concern is, and it goes back to even the injury situation or the roster situation, I should say, before Acuna's injury. Did you feel like you were as good as the Mets? Probably not. Is there a player you could add to make you better than the Mets? For me, I think that's hard to say. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's hard to say. And now without Acuna, to Kevin's point, if you do add one outfielder, I think that would have to be considered part of the process. It's not like you're going to add a Marte, for example, just to name one of the names that was mentioned, and you feel like you're completely on par with the New York Mets right now. You would have to add Marte, maybe another position player, maybe a starter, maybe a bullpen piece. It would have to be a 3 or 4 kind of person addition that you make via multiple trades, unless you can get 2 or 3 guys from one team. And why I worry about that a little bit, Kevin, is because I don't think the Braves farm system is as strong as it has been in years past. You've obviously had to move a lot of guys up, and a farm system every couple of years kind of resets itself. And I think you probably need more young talent in your farm system, not less. And if you're going to go out and add an outfielder or 2, a catcher, a shortstop, whatever you're looking at, a relief pitcher, certainly a starter, if you're talking about bringing in 3, 4 players, well, that, if we're being honest, means you're sending away probably 4, 5, 6, or 7 minor league prospects. And I don't know that that's viable right now, looking at the Braves situation in the farm system. And even if you were to add 2, 3, 4 guys. I know I'm being long-winded here, but there's a lot to consider. Even if you add 2, 3, 4 guys, I still don't know that you feel like you're the best team in the NL East. And the harsh reality is you're not getting a wild card spot. Right now, the National League West is so far out in front. You're like 12 games out from getting a wild card spot, and there's like 7 teams in front of you. That's not happening. So your realistic bet is to get better than the Mets, who've had injury problems significantly throughout their roster as well, and I think they expect to get some guys back. Is it worth trading away maybe 3, 4, 5, if not more than that, Kevin, minor league players in order to maybe get a little bit closer to maybe being as good as the Mets, who you're already almost 5 games down to?
Well, and again, I think that comes down to, if you want a great player in return, what's it going to take? That, and obviously the discussions about Freddie Freeman. Ben Anderson saying, hey, if you're not trying, you're telling Freddie goodbye. I don't know that that's true, Ben, because here's what I would say. I mean, Freddie Freeman's smart enough to look around and go, this roster is a shell of what it was, and not because the team got rid of them because they got hurt. Soroka hurt on the comeback trail, gets hurt again. Ronald Acuna, one of those things, he gets hurt. Marcell Ozuna gets hurt and then gets in trouble off the field. Those are things that you just can't, I think, foresee happening throughout the course of the roster. I don't think Freddie looks at it. I mean, you've been around baseball long enough. Freddie Freeman can go, look, guys, I mean, this roster is a shell of what it is. You don't have to be a smart guy to say, look, if half of your starting lineup gets injured, I mean, that's a tough sled. I think the bigger question would be, okay, so we make those trades, and then we bring Freddie Freeman back and say, okay, we made all these deals, and now we still may not be in a better spot in 2022. We got Acuna coming back. We got some of that, maybe Soroka coming back later in the season. And where does that leave you? What did you have to give up? Are you able to bring up through the minor leagues to supplement your roster? You may not be in a much better position than you were to start this season, which I think if the Braves stay healthy, BJ, you and I both thought, all things the same, if this team stays relatively healthy, which they have not, this is a playoff team. And I think if you get some of that back, if you're Freddie Freeman, you say, look, Acuna coming back, we'll see what the offseason brings. I think reevaluating the offseason, we get you back. We've got Riley. We've got Albies. We're going to put one of our young guys back out there in center field. Maybe it's Drew Waters. Maybe use this time to see if Drew Waters can hit at the major league.
Let me ask you this, Kevin, because you mentioned Drew Waters. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you're going to go out and get a Marte or a Haniger or, Peralta, one of these big time potential pieces that are out there, you're talking about in return trading a Pache, a Waters, a Davidson, a De La Cruz. Are you not?
I mean, to get something, you have to give something up. I know you and I like to joke all the time where it's like, hey, man, I'll give you Guillermo Heredia for Ketel Marte straight up, dude. It's a great deal. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. So I think if you're Atlanta, it's how much are you willing to part with? And if so, how much is it worth it to you? I take it back to like the Adam Wainwright, JD Drew trade. You made that move to stay relevant, to keep that streak alive, and you did, but you also gave up one of your best players, one of the best players in Major League Baseball, as it turned out. So I think you look at it and say, are there guys that we are not willing to part with? And if so, where does that leave us with our farm system? And do we think we're better off for it? I mean, Ketel Marte, 3 years remaining. I understand that Ben wrote back in, but yeah, Freddie Freeman's a rental player right now. He's running out of contract. So if you trade Freddie, you're not going to get a whole lot for him. So who's your best tradable piece? At the major league level, it's probably Ozzie Albies or Austin Riley. And I don't think you're trading either one of those guys, quite frankly. You have 2 backup catchers, an outfield that's basically AAA level, and Dansby Swanson, which, I mean, Dansby, I think's a good player. He's not playing like it right now. So you really on the major league roster don't have a lot, I don't think, that's going to garner a lot of, hey, I got to have this guy. At least not guys you're actually willing to move.
Maybe Charlie Morton, maybe.
But again, but this is where you're at. If you trade Charlie Morton, now you need another starting pitcher. So it's like you kind of solved one problem and created another one at the same time. So I think the Braves certainly are having a deep, long look of how much are we willing to give up to try to keep this 4.5 game dream alive versus are we just going to play it out, see if we can hang close for the next 2 weeks. And if it comes down to it at the trade deadline, maybe we go in then, or maybe we just let this thing play itself out. Again, I could see any of those scenarios potentially happening with this Braves team, and that conversation changes if Ian Anderson has to miss a significant amount of time with his sore arm. So we'll get to all that and more coming up. Home team Brandon Leak set to join us on the show as well. We'll ask him about all that. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Monday, Kevin and BJ. Good to have you along here on the show. We'll talk with the home team, Brandon Leak, coming up. Certainly look at all the Braves options, but certainly Ronald Acuna changes things in a big way. That discussion as to what they're going to do heading into the trade deadline at the end of the month. But coming up this month as well, BJ, it's the SEC Media Days, the ACC kickoff, kind of helping us get the unofficial start of the season going, where you have just a couple of weeks until fall practice begins there, first start part of August. And North Carolina players, Jason Jimmel, who I think is coming out to the ACC kickoff, representing North Carolina, said that his team not in favor of that expanded 12-team playoff. He said, quote, "I feel like 12 teams is too many games in a season for players, or 12 teams is too many games a season for players who want to play long-term football. 16, 17 games this season is a lot of wear and tear on the body, especially for guys who don't come out when they're playing." Your response to that?
I think it's a fair criticism. We've heard that for a couple of years now as the college football format, the season and the regular season has sort of evolved, and you've seen a game added here, a game added there, and now you talk about the potential of 2 or 3. Yeah, I understand that. And if you're a player, you worry about potentially, wear and tear. You worry about potentially another game to get hurt maybe, and you worry about the compilation, kind of the totality of everything. And Kevin, I don't know, how many teams this is a possibility for, but if you were to make during your career 4 conference championship games and then play in 4 playoffs in this new format, theoretically, could you be getting up near 60 games, 61, 62 type games potentially for your college career? If you were to play freshman, sophomore, junior, senior seasons, that's a lot. That's a lot. And certainly we can get Ben's perspective on that in a couple of days. But yeah, I could understand certainly some hesitation, some concerns, some worry. I know some, and you've heard a variety of different perspectives on this, have said, hey, if we're going to add a couple of more games to the postseason, do we need to take a game away from the regular season, maybe take a non-conference game away to potentially try to shorten this thing? I don't know, but I definitely think that's a fair observation, especially for those that are going to be out there actually doing it.
Would you let me hypothesize this? Would you be in favor of less football, i.e. take a regular season game away from everybody in order to get more football, which means an expanded playoff?
Well, I think if theoretically what we had to do was subtract a non-conference game, maybe. I know there are a lot of people who want to see a non-conference game replaced with an extra conference game to begin with. And I know you have sort of some inequitability across college football in terms of how those schedules are constructed. But maybe, listen, I think when we go about changing things in college football, right, and certainly we'll spend hours upon hours, days upon days talking about it, arguing about it, you got to get the perspective of the players. And I'd be interested to hear from more student athletes about potentially what they feel a regular season should be and what they feel a postseason should be in terms of games. Correct me if I'm wrong, once we get to this 12-team playoff, which I think is coming, if you go through a 12-game regular season, a conference, you could have an NFL schedule, right? You could essentially have an NFL schedule. And I understand you've had more games, at the FCS Division II level with extended playoffs before, but you are talking about, as we've seen it at those levels, a significant load athletically to go along with the academic responsibilities and the schedules and the logistics. So I absolutely hear that concern and I value it. And I do think as we move forward, it's important to get more opinions like that. I haven't talked to enough student athletes to know if that is a widespread concern, if that is something that's about 50-50, if that's a concern that many athletes do not share. I don't know. So I would be intrigued to get more input from student athletes on that, but I think it's certainly information that is valuable and information we need to consider.
Again, I think for the guys that, as he said, players who want to play long-term football, you're going to have to play 16, 17 games very soon for an NFL career, if that's the path you choose. I do think maybe this opens.
Yeah, but you're getting paid when you do that, though. That's a job.
I understand that. How many teams are going to play these 16 to 17 games every year? 2 programs, 3 programs, potentially. I mean, you could say Alabama will be doing it all the time. Maybe they have one of the deeper rosters as well. I think maybe it changes how you utilize your roster. Maybe you give more guys a little bit more playing time to try to make it through the season. I think you look at the NFL, the rosters are small. So when you say for guys who don't come out a lot, I mean, the NFL, you don't come out a lot. That's why even in blowouts, you see a lot of times everybody's still out there except the quarterback because they just don't have enough players on the roster to just sit there and take all the starters out. So I look at it and BJ, I think these are going to be certain problems that arise. Is it too many games? Possibly so. And I would be in favor of scaling it back, maybe a game in the regular season to get playoffs. Again, I was an 8-team guy. I never thought we were going to make the leap to 12. But here we are in favor of it. I could get where guys are coming from. But again, I think a lot of times you look at it and you say, North Carolina, I hear where you're coming from, but to this point, you've been a 13-game kind of program, right? You haven't had to worry about 14, 15, 16, 17 games potentially. Maybe with a new playoff, you think you're going to be there. I think that's one of those things where you say, oh, we're just going to be there every single year. I mean, I don't know that's necessarily true. So I think maybe one year you play 15, 16 games. The next year you may only play 12. You may only play 15.
I don't know necessarily that this comment was made, exclusively about North Carolina. The quote from Gemmell.
There's NFL. I mean, as we see through the draft, there's NFL guys on like rosters everywhere. So it's like the same thing can be said about North Carolina. That can be said about Liberty or Wake Forest. Or I mean, they're all getting guys drafted in the NFL. It's like maybe one, but they're still getting guys on their rosters that have aspirations of playing at the next level.
I do think what's interesting, and again, back to my comment about I'd like to see potentially, more input from student athletes on this, is if I'm reading this story correctly, the report was that nobody on the UNC team raised their hand in favor of a 12-team playoff. That's a pretty powerful result when you talk about, I'm guessing, 85 players, maybe more than that if you're including walk-ons, were asked how many of you are in favor of a 12-team playoff, and reportedly not one single player said, hey, I like this. So that's pretty telling, and I do think it's important. I think this is an important kind of a bit of information, because as we continue to change things in college football and expand things and sort of increase opportunities for revenue and increase opportunities for media coverage and sort of follow the ebb and flow of what fans want, what the media want, what a lot of decision makers in college sports want, we have to make a concerted effort to hear from those who actually play, to hear from those who are actually out there doing the work, who in a certain year, to your point, Kevin, may have to play 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more games. We have to value that input. It has to be part of our considerations. And I say not that you and I are decision makers, but just as college football talks about this and thinks about this and considers all viewpoints, we have to put a high priority on what the student athletes think. And I understand there's a lot to like about playoff expansion, right? More games, more money, more opportunities. But that's a pretty powerful bit of information that not a single player raised their hand in support of this. So I'd like to see more of that. There's a comment from Virgil, Kevin, saying this is going to take the fun out of the regular season. A lot to consider, but I do think as we weigh opinions, we have to make it a point to value what the student athletes themselves think.
Absolutely. And we followed up saying it's great because every game matters. Every game doesn't matter. Quite frankly, Virgil, for basically 60% of the teams, they don't matter, if not more percentage than that. But you lose 2 games, you're out in the current format. To me, nothing breeds more excitement than knowing you have a chance. And again, for all the teams that say, hey, I'm out after 3 weeks, is that fun? If you're a fan of the team, are you playing out a string? I mean, I don't think it makes college football more fun. I mean, look, is it more fun for college football that we know Alabama and Clemson and Ohio State are already in the college football playoffs? Is that fun?
Well, hold on. That's what I was going to ask you, because it's an interesting catch-22, because these teams haven't done anything wrong, mind you. It's they're dominating, but we're a month and a half away from college football starting, and barring a surprise, we already basically know who's going to be in the playoff. It's a very interesting situation to think about.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll look to chat with home team Brandon Leak when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to have you along here on this Monday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you. Glad you are with us as we start off the All-Star break. Again, we'll look ahead to the second half of the Braves. No Ronald Acuna Jr. And what do they do here post All-Star break? Our next guest will help us try to figure that out. Co-host of the Home Team in Hamilton show, 680 Fan Atlanta. Home Team, Brandon Leak joins us here on 3 and Out. Home Team, welcome. How are you?
Doing all right. Everybody's dealing with the same gut punch around Braves country.
Yeah, that's that one was tough to take. I think anybody that said, hey, going into the All-Star break, if we can keep this thing less than 5 games with the Mets, maybe you're a buyer on the flip side, and then you lose at very worst one of the top 5 players in Major League Baseball, maybe even the top 3 player in all of Major League Baseball. I mean, how do you bounce back from that, and how much has the mindset potentially of Alex Anthopoulos in the front office changed in just the 48 hours that have happened since Saturday?
Yeah, you have to, I think have multiple goals going on at one time now. One, you have to make sure that this injury is not a season buster where everything that has been up and down, even with Ronald Acuna Jr. in the lineup, doesn't completely go off the rails. I mean, the Braves were still having difficulties with offensive consistency. They were still leaving runners in scoring position. And now a guy who was a table setter, a guy with more than 50 RBI, a guy who was approaching 30 home runs, is not in the lineup anymore. Oh, by the way, he is one of the best players in all of Major League Baseball. So being able to provide that spark when you need some of those moments as well, I think you're going to have to adjust some multiple goals now. What is the goal at the trade deadline? What is the goal for the rest of the season? And what is the goal, the big picture for the Braves going forward? Because you have to start looking at with Ronald Acuna Jr. out of the lineup. This team is going to be different for the rest of this season. It's going to be different going into next year as well.
And Home Team, we've had some comments today saying, hey, could the Braves trade for this player or this player? Could you kind of remake yourself with a couple of trades? How viable do you think that is? And a kind of a 2-part question. Can you get to the point where you're playoff good with a few trades with this roster? And would the Braves be willing to give up the minor league prospects it would take to do that?
I don't think they should. I think any moves they make should be to tweak the roster and the lineup so that manager Brian Snitker has everything that he needs when he needs to go somewhere. Now, with Ronald Acuna Jr. out, does that mean another bat? Before he went down, I was screaming from the mountaintops. You need to make sure you get something in the bullpen just to make sure you don't give winnable games away late. I don't know what going into your farm system now for this version of the Braves does for you. You still have some questions about Christian Pache. Got sent down earlier after getting called up earlier this year, and he hasn't been hitting well. Do you go to Drew Waters now, and do you really want a minor league outfield? You're still just a few games behind the Mets for the lead in the National League East. So there are a lot of questions. I would not think that manager Alex Anthopoulos would be making moves that would be major to try to do something to make a long run. Wherever run the Braves come into this year, it will have to be with the guys who are currently on the roster.
I mean, you could argue you have maybe a minor league outfield right now at the major league level. But you have 4 of the 8 everyday position players are essentially backups, right? I mean, that's more than just an easy fix. And not to mention your starting pitching questions and the bullpen questions. Is that too much to try to handle at a trade deadline?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question to ask. And you just throw in the fact you brought up Jonathan Lucroy, what you're getting when you throw in Arcia to come in and platoon. I mean, this is not what the Atlanta Braves envisioned, obviously, when they started the season. And now that they've been in an up and down mode, kind of yo-yo baseball, and it just hasn't taken, throw in the fact that now Ian Anderson has something going on with his arm, and Brian Snitker said he might have to go to the IL. I mean, this is starting to feel like it's just not our year if you are a Braves fan, and it's one of those deals where I don't know if knee-jerk reactions or trying to come up with some magic elixir will be the answer. The truth is, you don't want to wave the white flag, but you also don't want to do anything that could jeopardize your future, which still looks pretty bright when you look at all that is across the organization.
We've seen some stories. Could the Braves trade Freddie Freeman, given that he's a free agent at the end of the year, obviously, and it looks like this season's in a tough spot? Does the news around Acuna influence what you might do with Freddie Freeman at all?
I don't think so. I think those are independent situations. If things go sour, I mean, Freddie Freeman, is somebody that can go and talk turkey with some other teams if he would like, but there's still some latitude that the Braves could have at the last minute. But reading an article in the Athletic with Freddie Freeman, it seems like things are good. They just aren't talking big numbers in business right now. Doesn't seem like he has any acrimony between himself and Alex Anthopoulos, and it just seems like he wants to be a Brave. He wants to remain here. He's a 10-5 guy. He knows the landscape of the National League East. He knows the landscape of a lot of the pitchers. He knows where the Braves could be heading. So it looks like that is something that is good for Braves fans. I don't think that any of the moves or the injuries impact what the organization will do with Freddie Freeman other than try to sign him to a monster deal and lock him up for many years to come.
Is that the direction you think they go? I know a lot of folks are like trade Freddie. I mean, that would be. I know you don't win games by trying to be PR nice all the time, but I mean that is that's the face of your team, right? I mean you're not trading him. Is that basically how you see it? And are they going to do everything to make sure he stays?
Yeah, it's as simple as it gets. You're not trading the MVP. You're just not doing it. And Ronald Acuna comes back. The saving grace is that this wasn't an injury where his knee is shredded. He tore his ACL. It's a pretty common injury in sports with sports medicine these days. Guys are coming back early. Everybody remembers Adrian Peterson from the Minnesota Vikings when he tore his knee, and he came back, I believe, it was either a month or 2 weeks ahead of schedule before people thought he was. So Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to be back. He might be exactly the same. He might be better. It might take him a while to get back, but Ronald Jr. is coming back, and I don't think the Braves are better if Freddie Freeman is gone. Now, there are some big questions. The truth is, as you sit right now, Freddie Freeman does not have a contract. Ronald Acuna Jr. has a torn ACL. Marcell Ozuna probably will never take another field or take the field ever again for the Atlanta Braves. And Travis d'Arnaud is still banged up, and he's in the final year of his contract. So you do have a lot of things that you have to work through by the time next season rolls around. But we're just at the halfway point of this season. The question is, what do the Braves have left in them? Can they scrap their way to at least some fun and competitive baseball and maybe trying to win an NL East at the end of the season?
If the Braves decide to be sellers at the trade deadline, is Charlie Morton as good as he's been, a guy that could get you some return?
Oh, yeah. Anytime you have an arm, that can get you something in return. And also players that show potential. I don't know long-term what people or what the Braves think about Dansby Swanson, but I don't want to be a guy who gets a $200 million contract. So you have to wonder the way he's been up and down this year. He's had some good moments. He's had some not so good moments. If that's a piece you could use to yield something else that you're looking for. But the Braves do have some prospects. They do have a couple of players. I just think now the way things are, they don't need to make any rash decisions because 4 games out, I think the first couple of series are going to tell the tale of where the Braves are. Either they're going to still be an up and down team when they get the Rays and the Padres, or they can mess around and be 7 or 8 games out right after the All-Star break. And then you just start thinking about, how do you finish up this season without any other damage to the organization?
Home team Brandon Leak joining us here on 3 and Out. And home team, you look at, you mentioned the gut punch coming right out. You've been around the ATL a long time. You've had the Dominique Achilles, the Michael Vick broken ankle. Where does that Ronald Acuna injury go in terms of all-time significant Atlanta sports injuries, where you just look at it and, just devastation from the moment it happened?
Well, it goes down on the all-timer list. It is a biggie. I will say that, if you're looking towards the positive, when Dominique Wilkins tore his Achilles, it was the 42nd game of the year, and the Hawks missed the playoffs that year. The next year, they were a playoff team. When Michael Vick broke his leg, when Adelius Thomas snapped his leg inside the dome for a preseason game, Falcons had an awful season. They went 5-11. The next year, they went 11-5 and made a fantastic run through the playoffs. So if you want to put that in your back pocket for whatever it's worth, Ronald Acuna Jr., 8 months from now, it will be close to the start of the regular season. So he'll be right on target to start with his teammates. And, hopefully good things come from the Braves with a healthier lineup. Freddie Freeman signed and some answer to wherever Marcell Ozuna will be or who his replacement will be when we get to that part of next year.
Finally, I know we've talked about it. Will there be a 2-week span that kind of defines it? But here, when we get to the end of the month, do you think the Braves are buyers or are they sellers?
Well, you're not You're not buying a whole lot. I think if it comes down to just one or the other, you're looking to buy one piece, one arm. It makes no sense to give up a whole bunch of stuff when you have so many things that you need to worry about going into next year. I think this is now a 1 year, a half a season deal. See if you can get a spark. See if you can get a spark from some of the guys at the bottom of the lineup. The one thing about them, they're a likable group of guys because nobody expects anything out of those. Didn't expect anything out of the guys that have been called up. So I think they'll be rootable when they're at home. And I don't think you do a whole lot of restructuring of this franchise with just so many things gone bad and so many injuries this season.
Home Team Brandon Leak, co-host of Home Team in Hamilton, joining us here on 3 and Out. Home Team, always a pleasure. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Anytime, guys.
Again, Ronald Acuna, torn ACL. That one hurt, all literally and figuratively for Braves country, seeing that over the weekend. We'll come back with more 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on Three and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you. All-Star game tomorrow night. BJ, how cool is this? It was just announced Shohei Ohtani in the Home Run Derby tonight going to start the game for the AL, and he's going to DH and bat leadoff for the AL as well. So, again, baseball fans get a little something you just never see, and that's a dude who can literally do all of it. Home Run Derby, start the game, and DH to get it going.
I mean, where does his season rank in one of the all-time, or on the all-time great list that you've seen? I mean, this is incredible to be one of the best pitchers in the game, one of the best hitters in the game. You're talking about potentially getting up to 50, 60 home runs, one of the all-time great power seasons. I mean, we've never seen anything like this, at least that I can recall.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't see guys do this. And in fact, at most turns, BJ, it's discouraged. Right? I mean, you see teams go, hey, man, we know you can hit a little bit, but nah. Your job is to go out there and strike dudes out. Well, Shohei Ohtani's job is to strike guys out, take his glove off, put on a different glove, and go play the outfield and hit baseball. And he's doing that, and doing it at a high level. I know even now there's people like, hey, is this sustainable? Can you do this for 10 years, a decade, pitching and hitting? I mean, I think you can. Guys used to do it way back when. We haven't seen a guy kind of do it. Even Babe Ruth, a lot of people will point out, eventually gave up pitching at an all-star level, by the way, to just go be a position player and hit every day. And obviously we know the rest of the story with Babe Ruth. So how long does he continue to do it? I don't know. But, man, enjoy it now while he's doing it, because you just don't see guys who go out there on the mound and then turn around and play the field, play every day, can hit the baseball, hit for average, hit for power, and then turn around and get guys out at a high level, man. And as I said, it's often discouraged by people inside the sport to do that. We'll come back. Hour 2 around the corner. We'll take 3. Jamie Bradford of JB and Goldwater Show will join us next hour. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here. Hour 2, 3 and out. We'll hear from Jamie Bradford of the JB and Goldwater Show. We'll talk some South Carolina football with him coming up. Also, what moments have we seen in college football the last 20 years or so that maybe produced some cool NIL deals potentially if they had happened in the age that we're living in now as well? So we'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. But first, let's take 3 here on 3 and out. And for 3 and out today, BJ, we bring in our own PJ Zuko to help us out with 3 and out this afternoon.
What's going on, my people? Glad to be here on the show with you guys. But first, take 1. We're going to start with take 1.
Take 3, take 1. That's a very good place to start.
Seems like a very, yes. The biggest free agent need for the Braves, if they're still going to go for it, if they're still, they feel good after the first couple series, after the All-Star break, they say, all right, we're going to go for this. We're going to try and get in the playoffs here. We're feeling good, but we just need one or two more things. What's the biggest need?
I mean, given what happened to Acuna, unfortunately, I think it's outfield. And we've seen some names mentioned, right? Whether it's Joey Gallo or Ketel Marte or, Mitch Haniger, somebody like that. We've seen names mentioned, but right now you just don't have a lot of power. And to go back to what you said, Kevin, in the opener, of the show, look, you're not replacing Ronald Acuna. Okay, so anybody you're bringing in is not meant to be Ronald Acuna. It's impossible. He's one of the 3-5, best players, any position, regardless where you play in baseball. And what he meant to this team is irreplaceable. You wish him the best, and you hope he's ready to go at the start of next season. But I think if you could potentially bring in a bat in the outfield, somebody with some power, that might be where you go. But I will say this, Kevin, if the Braves get bad news with Ian Anderson, I mean, you're quickly running out of options there as well. So catcher too. The bullpen is always going to be an issue. You keep your fingers crossed that Ian Anderson's okay. You need help a lot of different places.
Yeah, that's tough, man. BJ, right now I can literally look at the outfield and say you need an entire new outfield. Right? I mean, Guillermo Heredia is nice as a corner outfielder, as a guy that maybe gets to play a couple days a week, but to have to play 70, 80 games with Heredia, I mean, I guess you could do it. I just don't think his bat's going to hold up. And you have catcher issues. I think you need bullpen issues, bullpen help. I mean, where to start? I mean, I guess I would start with starting pitching because if you're going to do something there, BJ, that'll help you more than any bat will. I mean, I think the offense is what it is. I mean, so shore up your pitching as best you can and roll with it. That's really all I would do, because short of finding Ronald Acuna Jr. version 2.0, which you're not getting in a trade, what are you going to do? So I would start with starting pitching and see what you can get there and hope it can keep you in the race as long as possible.
Moving on to take 2, the Tampa Bay Lightning have not stopped partying with the Stanley Cup just yet. Just seeing videos and so all over social media, pictures everywhere, as they should be, man. Enjoying their time with the Stanley Cup there after winning their second straight. But guys, what's the coolest trophy in sports?
I think it's probably the Heisman, right? Because the Heisman Trophy, you think about trophies, most of them outside of the Stanley Cup, you don't know like the official name. You think about the Heisman Trophy, and it is something not only that and it has kind of a timeless quality to it, but it's one of those trophies where you can literally do the Heisman after a big play. And we've seen, going back to Desmond Howard, I'm thinking about Trey Mason in the national title game. I mean, you've seen all kind of players score, do the Heisman, and it's an iconic pose. It's an iconic trophy. It's kind of, I know in college football you have a number of different trophies, the Biletnikoff Award and the Thorpe Award and all that good stuff. But the Heisman is kind of the one name, one reference trophy that everybody knows. Even if you're not a college football fan, even if you don't follow college football, you know about the Heisman Trophy, and you probably know who won the Heisman Trophy and who the candidates are for the season you're in. So you have a lot of cool trophies like the Golden Egg, right, in the Egg Bowl with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I know the Big Ten has a lot of cool trophies like Paul Bunyan's axe and stuff like that. But for me, I think it's just so iconic, and it's a statue that you can replicate and people do all the time, even playing backyard football. I think it's the Heisman Trophy.
I think the Stanley Cup is very unique because everybody gets to have it for a little bit, right? I mean, on a team sport, everybody on the Tampa Bay Lightning, I think, gets like a day with it where they could do whatever they want. And if you hear some of the stories, people pretty much do whatever they want with the Stanley Cup, but they have it for a day and everybody gets it. You don't get to hold on to the Super Bowl trophy. Like, they're not going to let the Lombardi Trophy just go with 80 or 54 dudes do whatever they want. I mean, I guess the Tampa Bay Bucks did have it for a day and they almost threw it in the bay, throwing it from boat to boat. So, but you don't really get to hold on to some of the stuff. I would say maybe the coolest one, it's not even really a trophy. But there's two. I will say two. And they're kind of the mustard belt for the hot dog eating championship. That's pretty cool. Like, the belt is kind of synonymous with, like, it's mustard. You're eating hot dogs. But maybe the coolest, it's not even a trophy, would be the green jacket, Augusta National winning the Masters. You get a piece of clothing that is synonymous with you winning. You can wear it out. It's about the only time you can wear a green jacket and not look weird. Be like, dude, that guy's got a green coat on. Like, I think it's pretty cool.
Well, I'm not going to go
I'll say
off.
Augusta National, the Masters.
There you go. I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent here. BJ, we're not going to get into this argument because I know you didn't even consider this sport because you don't think it's a sport. But it is what it is. If you have a good 10 minutes or something like that later tonight, Google all the different kinds of NASCAR trophies that you get for winning certain races. I mean, these are three just off the top of my head. Nashville, you get a guitar. And actually, a few years back, they gave they didn't tell the fans this, obviously, but they gave Kyle Busch 2 guitars after winning a race, and he smashed the first one after he got off the car, like as a PR thing. It was pretty cool, like at a rock concert. So
why would you do that? Okay.
Well, it's like, like the old rock concerts, right? You guys jamming out whatever at the end of the concert.
If you respect the guitar, though, you don't break it.
Okay, that's what everyone said. Anyway.
Obviously, the music guys who love guitars are like, don't smash it.
Have some fun with it, man. Have some fun. But anyway, so you have that. Martinsville, one of the crown jewels of NASCAR, in my opinion. If you win, you get a grandfather clock, which is just one of the best NASCAR trophies ever. And 3, they're actually going to Loudon in New Hampshire this weekend. If you win at Loudon, you get a giant lobster.
Like a real one?
A giant lobster. You hold it up. You get out of your car, hold it up. There's plenty of Denny Hamlin, who's won there before, is actually
like a real one.
Yeah, like a real one. Like Denny Hamlin, who's scared of lobsters, has won there before. And the first time he refused to hold it. The second time he actually did it. But no, seriously, it's
like coating with a fish.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. But if you ever look up some NASCAR trophies, it's a pretty good Google if you want to waste some time. But take 3 here. Biggest piece of advice for visitors trying to survive this heat and humidity down south, because I know we're all affected by it. We all got to live in it, and maybe some more than others. But best type of advice you would give for visitors trying to survive this?
I mean, find you someplace cool and stay there. I mean, look, it's rough. I mean, it's something serious. And I mean, even just like going outside for a few minutes, it's not just the heat, obviously, it's the heat and the humidity together. And the heat, certainly by itself, but you add in that humidity and it just wears you down. I stay hydrated. On a serious note, you got to stay hydrated. That's serious. You sweat out all your fluids. You've got to stay hydrated. Find you some shade. I mean, if you're out and about, I know that's kind of hard to come by at the beach. A lot of people go to the beach, but if you're just in the park or something, find you some shade. But yeah, get somewhere cool, get the air blowing on you, and just stay there for a while and take it all in.
Yeah, I was going to say Southeast Georgia is a heck of a place when the sun goes down. That's what I would say. If you want to survive the heat. Also, what anybody ever tells you about, I know this doesn't really have to do with the heat, but when everybody tells you about the sand gnats, like whatever they tell you makes them go away, it doesn't. That's just my standard line. When, hey, what do you do for these gnats? You don't. You just they're there. They're not going away. Actually, if you're mad about the heat, the gnats don't like it as much. So, like, while it's actually like a gajillion degrees outside, the gnats shouldn't be that big of a problem. It's when it cools off, then they come out and they really start bothering you. So there's my pseudo pieces of advice. Like, basically wait till the sun goes down, or if you really get distracted by the gnats, you got to go out in the heat anyway. so the gnats aren't there and bothering you. And if somebody tells you they have a gnat remedy, they don't. They're lying. They just think it works.
I was about to say that doesn't exist.
It's the it's where they call that the it's not the placebo. It's the placebo effect where it's like if you think it works, it does.
Yes.
Is that right? Is the placebo
As far as I know, that is right. Yes.
Yeah, the placebo effect. It works if you think it does. I don't feel these gnats.
Well, what if you don't think it works?
I guess it doesn't.
That's what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, that's true. Look, hey, it seems to be working. I've only got 4,000 around my face instead of 10,000. It must be working. It makes them go away. I've heard everything. What? Why we have this? I mean, what the heck? We're on Nat Talk right now. What is like the strangest thing you've ever heard somebody say when like trying to say this works and like getting gnats to get off your face and all that when you're outside?
I think I've seen somebody like rub dirt on themselves, and I'm like, isn't that, don't bugs live in the dirt? Like isn't that attracting?
It's
Yeah,
called sand gnats.
right. You're like actually attracting them more. You're like taking their environment and putting it on you. No, I'm not in favor of that.
Well, then you just get red ants on you, and then you don't have to worry about the gnats.
My favorite is like you'll see like especially people that I don't know why I guess it's runners because like that's just I guess they're out and about it, but you'll see like runners like drop a dryer sheet out of their hat. It's like that doesn't work. Like the putting some some Gain dryer sheet in the back of your shirt or your hat that doesn't do anything.
I mean, when you like light the candles that make them go away, does that ever work for y'all?
Oh, like the little like the little incense candles or whatever. I've seen people do that. I mean, I think it makes them go like a foot away, maybe, but they still swarm around. They're basically wherever that little stream of smoke is. They're not right there, but they're still all over the place. I found that doesn't work either. Just keep trying things, guys. Maybe we'll find something that just eradicates them at some point, and they'll go away. I'm not hoping for that, though. We got more to come. Let's take 3. It's 3 and Out. All across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We come back. Jamie Bradford of JB and Goldwater Show will join us. We're talking South Carolina football here on 3 and Out. Good to have you here on this Monday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you as we work through mid-July practices for college football, getting back underway first part of August, and then the countdown is on. Of course, Shane Beamer in there at South Carolina. What do we expect to see in the coming weeks out of the Gamecocks? Joining us here from the JB and Goldwater Show, Jamie Bradford steps in here on 3 and Out. Jamie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. How are y'all doing?
Hey, we're doing fantastic, and obviously first year head coach in Shane Beamer. What is the realistic expectations with what he's working with there in Columbia that people have for this team?
Oh, well, it's funny when you ask different people, you get a really wide range of answers, right? I mean, you've heard anything from a lot of national media folks thinking, well, this is a 3 or 4 win team, to some of the more local people thinking, well, this team might go bowling 6 or 7. Maybe they can sneak up into 8 wins. I think what's important, first of all, from a talent standpoint, this team should win more than 3 or 4 games, guys. I mean, they do have more talent than people think that they have. Are they loaded? No. Are they in the top half of the SEC? No. But they have enough there to win more than 3 or 4 games like some people think. Now, will they? I'm not sure. But they also have a favorable start to the season in 2 games that they should win, Eastern Illinois and at East Carolina. And if you start the year 2-0, even though you have to go to Georgia next and then you host Kentucky, at least you have some momentum. You've got some confidence, and we'll see what that means. And then after that, you've got Troy, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. I mean, you could have 4 wins right there in the first 6 games. So I think confidence is key for this team early, but they're working really hard, and we'll see what happens.
I look at this defensive line, and I see a group that could be one of the best in the SEC. I know people like to talk about the quarterback position, but when you look at this defensive line, is that where South Carolina could win some ball games?
You're right. You're dead on with that. I was in the facility about a month ago. I was up there for the regionals, and I was spending some time with a couple of the coaches, just kind of walking around, looking at things, talking to guys. And you're spot on, man. They feel really good on both lines of scrimmage, both up front on the defense and the offensive side. There's obviously some questions to be had behind them. But in this league, as you well know, I mean, you look at Clemson. They're in the ACC, right? And for years, they were really, 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 really good. Now they're elite, and they became elite. And Dabo Swinney will tell you they became elite when they dominated the trenches. And being in the ACC or whatever, none of that crap matters. None of that matters. What matters is that they dominate up front, and then when they get to those big games at the end of the year, they can beat all those teams, and everything has filled in around them. That's where South Carolina was back in the heyday of Spurrier, when they were winning all those games, 11 wins every year. They were really good in the trenches, and that's what they feel like gives them the best chance this year. Clearly, you're throwing names out like Kevin Harris and Marshawn Lloyd, and we'll see what DeCarrion Joyner does, and there's some other guys that are worth talking about, and they should be discussed. But when you're good up front, especially in the SEC, you give yourself a chance. It doesn't mean that you'll win every game, but if you're not good up front, you don't give yourselves a chance, and you will lose a lot.
Jamie Bradford joining us here. And Jamie, how do they feel about this team offensively? You talked about the line, and you have a great running back in Kevin Harris, but a young quarterback in Luke Doty. With those wide receivers, I know Amarian Brown, a transfer in from Georgia Tech, is kind of a big play receiver. How do they expect that offense to be with the line? Are they going to be more run-focused because of that experience, or do they think with a young quarterback, will still be able to fling the football around a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that early in the year, they're really going to rely on what they know works, and that's running the football. And then after that, we'll kind of see how it plays out. What's interesting is they are, pretty excited about some of the guys at wide receiver. They've worked really hard. You mentioned Amarian Brown, the transfer, and you've got DeCarrion Joyner in there who's he's had rave reviews all summer. I think they like where guys like Otrey Smith stand. He's been rehabbing for a little while, and he's pretty much ready to go. Jalen Brooks is another guy they're excited about. And then there's a bunch of dudes who have some ability, but they're fairly unproven. Either because they haven't seen the field much, or when they were out there, they just didn't get it done. But what is interesting about this offense, guys, I mentioned I was in the facility just kind of talking with some of the coaches like Pat DeMarco and Eric Kimmery and those guys. They feel really good about their group of tight ends. And these guys aren't your not all of them are just your classic 6'4", 250, 60-pound tight ends. Carolina's had a lot of those guys over the years. Nick Muse maybe is that guy, but you bring up other names like Eric Shaw, Jaheim Bell, who you actually saw in the spring game at running back, but that's because they had low numbers there. Kevion Mullins, Keyshawn Toney, guys like that who actually have some ability. EJ Jenkins is a guy they don't know what to do with. He's the transfer who came from St. Francis with Jason Brown, his buddy, the quarterback. He's a 6'7" receiver, or he's a tight end. So what they're doing, they're not putting these guys, not backing them into a corner. They're not painting one picture. What they're doing is they're designing an offense around matchups. And so they're going to utilize all of these wide receivers, tight ends, whatever it may be, in different roles, and they're going to figure out what matchups are best for this club, and that's kind of what their offense will look like. And as time goes along, they'll probably recruit more to what they want to do, but right now they're designing their offense around their personnel, and I think that's probably pretty smart.
What are the expectations for Luke Doty, who we saw a little bit last year and obviously has impressive credentials from high school? What are Gamecocks fans and what are the coaches expecting to see this year?
Well, I think the coaches, I think it's pretty simple. Don't be stupid. It might sound harsh, but look, do have some guys around you. Trust them. Let's be smart, especially out of the gates. Kind of ease into this thing. You're the guy. Know that you're the guy. And as you gain more confidence and we're able to play a little bit more football out here, you'll start to be able to do some things that you maybe did in high school, be a little bit more of a risk taker and a difference maker and things like that. I know this, inside the program, they're excited about Luke, and he's a guy who certainly has ability, and he has some similarities to a name that's very popular in Gamecock Nation, and that's Connor Shaw. I'm not comparing him to Connor, saying that he's Connor or he's going to be Connor or anything like that, but there are similarities in his game, and that's a good thing. So if they play their cards right, they can build off of that. From a fan's perspective, I think that there's some skepticism out there, and I understand that. I mean, they saw him struggle kind of towards the end of the year. He also, by the way, had a great where he was 18 of 22 for about 190 yards against Georgia in that start last season, and nobody else did anything around him. So he does have some experience. Carolina fans saw him in the spring game, and they weren't impressed, but I wouldn't put any stock in that at all. The spring game was very mumble-jumbled and put together. And I think that August will prove that Luke Doty is the starting quarterback. He should be the starting quarterback, and we'll see how much he's pushed over the next month and a half or so. But, I think Carolina fans feel okay, and we'll just have to wait and see how it all works out.
You mentioned the defensive side of the ball. They feel good up front. What about their defensive philosophy as a whole? Or is it to try to just keep them in ball games? Where do they think they can be defensively? How much can they rely on them to kind of keep them in some ball games and give them a chance?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question right there, my friend. Look, here's the thing. I think that especially early in the year, South Carolina, anybody who watches the Gamecocks play should probably understand that this defense is going to have to do a couple of things to help them maybe win a game or two that they shouldn't. I'm not saying that they're going to pitch shutouts. Those days are almost over, right? And we see offenses now in the SEC much different from what they used to be. I mean, Josh Heupel is now the head coach at Tennessee. Eventually, their offense is going to be really, really good. Eli is up there at Missouri, and they've got a bunch in the works up there. They'll have a good offense as well. We know about Florida. We know about Georgia. And then we all know what's on the west side of the league as well. So, they're going to have a bunch of challenges. What you saw late last year, that's not this team. It's just not. There were a lot of problems that were going on, but that team that was giving up 40 to 50 points every week, that's not. You're not going to see that. I'm not saying that somebody might not ring the bell on them a couple of times here and there, but that's not consistent. And so they're going to have to probably play pretty well. There's going to be a lot on their shoulders. What's expected from them, I think what's expected is that they're going to be able to play well up front, and then that's going to buy the back end some time. They've brought in this 4-2-5 scheme again, like Ellis Johnson used to run, and they'll be able to probably mix and match some guys to try to find the right equation, if you want to call it that. and we'll see what happens. But I think that what they're hoping is by about the middle of the season, that sucker, hopefully they're injury free, and it's probably solidified itself because you got A&M, Florida at Missouri, Auburn, and Clemson to finish. So it might want to be pretty good by the time those guys get there.
And clearly, Jamie, in the division, people are talking more about Georgia and probably even Florida. But you look at South Carolina and kind of the youth, the excitement around this staff. You look at recruiting. I think next year South Carolina's like somewhere in the top 15, 16 in terms of their recruiting class and climbing. Does it feel like there's a lot of big picture momentum around this program?
Absolutely. Yeah, Shane Beamer has captured this fan base. He started within the building over there, and he has utilized social media. I don't know how much y'all follow anything on social media related to South Carolina, but let's just say this. I mean, it was a cesspool leading up to the whole coaching change and through it. Nobody was happy about anything. It was just a mess. And social media is not necessarily the end all be all of anything. It's not even the real world, in my opinion. But when you're recruiting kids, they're all on it and they see it and they feel it. And so he's found a way to kind of flip that around, and he has created some momentum. I will tell you that later on this week, that momentum is going to get a lot larger. There's going to be some big stuff coming on the recruiting front for South Carolina in the next 3 or 4 days, and they're continuing to kind of ride that wave. So, he's done it a multitude of ways. Shane has opened himself up to all types of interviews. He's opened the program. He's exposed it. He's kept the energy positive inside and outside of the building. And most importantly, you got to win games. I mean, you can sit here and talk about how great everything's going to be all you want to, but unless you win games, it doesn't matter. But what they're hoping is that this positive energy has kind of turned the page, and these guys will go out and that will help them play a little bit better, especially early in the year to gain some confidence. But overall, yes, this from 6 months ago, it's as night and day. And I'm around these guys a lot. It's night and day from what it used to be.
That was my final question for you, Jamie. As you look at South Carolina, theirs was kind of the tale of a lot of teams in 2020 where, hey, are we going to get to play? Okay, we're going to play. And then now we have a couple of guys opt out. Now the coach is gone, and now we're just trying to figure out a way to get it over with. How much do you look at momentum of the program, et cetera, and base anything of it off of what happened in 2020, which was obviously something so unusual and something obviously we hope we don't see again anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everything happens for a reason. And, I understand South Carolina fans. Every fan base wants to win, and everybody looks for somebody to blame. I don't look at Will Muschamp and try to place a bunch of blame at his feet. Will Muschamp did everything he could at South Carolina, everything he could. And all the experiences I ever had personally with him, I respect the hell out of him, and I wish him the absolute best in everything that he does in the future. I think he came to South Carolina with great intentions, and it just didn't work out. It didn't work out. And some things kind of went south and went haywire, and by about the middle of last year, the energy was just sucked out of this program. And I think that all contributed to where we are today. People were looking for a reason to believe again in the future of Gamecock football. And, Shane Beamer has also found a way to tie in the greatest tenure or the greatest time in this program's history to now. I mean, he helped recruit everything that produced what you saw in that 10 through 13 run. And so, I think people have started to kind of see that, and it's helped kind of tie that Spurrier era back into the program. And I think people are excited about the future. Again, got to win football games. But a lot of folks felt really, really low, and a lot of the optimism over the last 6-7 months has kind of given them a new perspective and maybe a little bit of an 05 look at the program again when Steve Spurrier said he was going to do something and he delivered on that promise.
Jamie Bradford, JB and Goldwater Show, our guest here on 3 and Out. Jamie, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Anytime, guys. Take care.
Appreciate it. Jamie Bradford joining us here on 3 and Out as South Carolina. BJ, before we step aside, just your thoughts there, because I kind of felt like they were one of those teams where whatever momentum they were going to have in 2020 was never going to be realized because, again, you had guys opting out. Then you had the coaching change, more guys when that was made, when they said, hey, Will Muschamp is gone, they said, you know what? I'm going to opt out the rest of the way as well. How do you get that momentum back? He says Shane Beamer's trying to do that. But, man, 2020 for South Carolina was just – it felt like at the end they were one of those programs where they were like, let's just get this over with.
Well, yeah, struggled down the stretch and did not play well. But I think moving forward from that, this is a team with a lot more talent than people realize. I mean, folks here know about Kevin Harris. Obviously, I think he's the best running back in the SEC. What he did last year was pretty unparalleled in terms of historical production and averaging over 6 yards per carry. I think South Carolina is going to be better on the offensive line and especially on the defensive line where you have a couple of all SEC type guys. I think this roster is better than people think. And early on, you heard Jamie mention it, you don't have the most daunting of schedules. You expect to start out with a couple of wins. If that can turn that negative momentum of the end of last season into positive momentum, this could be a team that's playing with confidence down the stretch. So I think South Carolina is a team worth keeping an eye on in the SEC East.
We've got more to come here on this Monday here on 3 and Out. Will Vanderhort will join us. We'll talk some college football with him coming up in the final hour as well. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Monday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here. Glad you're making us a part of your day. Of course, we're about halfway into July. And of course, name, image, likeness has been on the docket for a couple weeks. And we've seen players get deals here and there. But BJ got us thinking, like, what famous plays? Because now everything is like, if it goes viral, you've basically got a deal, right? I mean, we saw the Suns in 4 guy. Literally a guy that got famous for punching another fan in the face and saying Suns in 4 has gotten deals. You're laughing. It's true. Like, he got a deal. He got an appearance fee to, like, go to a sports bar somewhere. It's like, come meet the Suns in 4 dude. Like, it's crazy. But, like, what moments in football might have produced some pretty cool, like, name, image, likeness deals just on the fact that they were so huge and, it would have been like a no-brainer.
Yeah, Christian listed a couple. The Marshawn Lynch driving the trainer's car, the Michigan punter against Michigan State want to get away. I think that the Ian Johnson proposal was so storybook. It was like watching a movie in real life. And if you don't remember that, it was when Boise State beat Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl. And first and foremost, that was one of the great games like ever. That's one of the great college football games ever that even people who aren't college football fans at least have heard of, right? And then you had Boise State get down the field trying to win late. They had the hook and ladder, and they get down the field. And then they have the Statue of Liberty where they do like the fake throw, and I think it was Jared Zabransky, like, put the ball behind his back, and Ian Johnson grabbed it and ran into the end zone for a game-winning touchdown against Oklahoma in what at the time was a monumental upset. And Ian Johnson was the running back who scored, and immediately after scoring the touchdown that won the game in one of the most iconic, probably, bowl games we've seen that wasn't a national championship, he then ran over and proposed to his girlfriend, who was a Boise State cheerleader on the sideline. I mean, just incredible. You can't write that. If you would have written that script, somebody would have looked at you and said, come on, that's unrealistic. It happened in real life. And can you imagine him, without the logos and stuff, they're kind of recreating it. And then he gets up and says, I got my diamond at ... Like, dude, come on, Kevin, come on.
Yeah, that one was kind of made for it. I think you brought up one, and we were talking about this earlier, the Johnny Manziel with the money sign that he would give after big plays. I think that would have been one that certainly would have grabbed.
He stops in the middle of it and goes, does the money sign and goes, I go to State Bank.
I just thought about this one. I mean, maybe in a bad way, but was it Miami? What team was it where the dude had like a fake, like, heart attack and just fell over on the field? Was that Miami?
I don't remember exactly. I remember the play. Yeah.
I think that might be one that could have garnered some attention.
I mean, what about when Tim Tebow was doing the speech and he's crying and he stops and goes, when I get red eyes, I clear up my eyes with, and then he holds up the eye drops.
When I make a guarantee, it's a guarantee. And so are the good folks at whatever bank. They make a great guarantee. Yeah, that would have been, there's so many options. I think that were out there. But yeah, that would have been just a couple of the ones that I think really would have caught hold of me. There's been so many, like, iconic moments in college football, like the kick six. Like, Auburn's going to win the football game. Like, Chris Davis running, hey, there's a whole number of things you could have done with like the kick six, like, half the state loves you, half the state loathes you.
After he stops, after running 100 yards and chaos is all around him, he grabs a Powerade and takes a drink and goes, now I'm refreshed. Yeah. After 100 yards, make sure you get your electrolytes with Powerade or whatever. Yeah.
The Iron Bowl. Yeah, no, I think there's some of those where, like, those moments transcend kind of the sport where, like, everybody, if you say the kick six to, like, a casual college football fan, they're like, oh yeah, that's when Alabama lost the game to Auburn, and Auburn ran it all the way back for a touchdown to win. I mean, those kind of things just live on in infamy. You even go back, like, what all could you have done with, like, the Cal Stanford game when, like, the band's on the field and, all that kind of stuff where, you have guys running through the band. It's like, hey, I can weave my way through traffic and still get it done. Whatever. It's I think
like a car going in and out, dude.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless when you go back and think about some of those all-time college football moments. We've got more to come. hopefully we're set up for some great, just all-time moments here in 2021 as well. We'll come back, more football talk on the way. We'll look at the Braves coming up in the second half. What on earth are they trying to do as we head towards the trade deadline as well? It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here with you. Final hour, we'll look at the Atlanta Braves coming up with what they're looking at the post-All-Star break. Also, Will Vanderhort, ClemsonInsider.com will join us. We'll talk Clemson and Georgia with him. Also, ESPN put out the top 10 QBs in the NFL, BJ, and, well, let's just say it's quite a list. We'll just leave it at that and discuss that coming up a little bit later in the show. But we're at the All-Star break, BJ, which is kind of I always look at it as like the midway point of summer to me, because like, hey, we're at the All-Star break, got about halfway to go. I know kids start school earlier than I did, but it's still kind of like the Midsummer Classic, kind of aptly named. It always felt like, hey, we're closer to going back to school than not going back to school once the All-Star break was over. Now, as I've gotten older, it just means, hey, we're closer to college football than we are not closer to college football.
Yeah, and I get that. You got the home run derby tonight. Is this
legitimately getting excited about college football closer to college football?
No, right. I said that a couple of weeks ago, that you reach a point somewhere in the summer where it's no longer next season and it becomes this season, and you start saying like, hey, Georgia Clemson opens up this season. I think, yeah, you're right. Once you get into July, especially mid-July, you're there. It's this season. But with the home run derby, do you think Ohtani puts on a show? It's incredible that he's going to pitch. I mean, is this a guy that goes out and does what everybody expects him to tonight, or do you think there could be kind of a guy that not everybody's talking about who comes out and wins it?
I hope he puts on a show, because like he has been the talk of baseball, and just quite frankly, unless you watch the highlights, you don't get to see him play, man, because we're on the East Coast. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I would like for him to go out and show out. Again, I picked someone else when we had this last week on the show for who wins the home run derby. I still think somebody will win, because it seems like the guy who's always hyped up to win it never does. It's always, I say sometimes it will, but most of the time it seems like it's somebody else will come in and win. And with the format, sometimes like, hey, this guy hit 32 home runs. Unfortunately, 28 of them came in the first round, where all he needed to do was move on. And now he's tired and's got nothing left in the tank at the end of the day. So I hope he puts on a good show. Colorado, to me, is a fun place to have home run derby, because the balls explode out of there anyway. So like, this ought to be fun. Watching how this thing unfolds tonight. I hope Ohtani does well, because again, it's a lot of people's first opportunity to really watch him play for an extended amount of time, because all the Angels games are starting at 10 o'clock on the West Coast there.
Well, and I believe you have Joey Gallo going tonight as part of it with Texas. And that's a guy that everybody's been talking about for a couple of days now, really even a couple of weeks, about potentially being an option for the Braves. And I don't know what it would take to get him. He's one of those power hitters that a lot of the times he either walks, hits a home run, or strikes out, kind of the modern day power hitter. But could you be looking at a guy in the home run derby tonight who could potentially be rumored to be an Atlanta Brave over the next couple of weeks until we get up to the trade deadline? I
mean, potentially so. I think number 13 slamming into the outfield wall might have changed some of those aspirations. We'll get to that coming up in the final hour of the program, where we'll look at what is the Braves' mindset at this point. But yeah, I think there's a couple of guys you might be looking at and say, hey, you're not on a contending team. I know the Braves are right there in that window. Could they be an Atlanta Brave in the not too distant future? I think that's a fun question to ask when you are watching the All-Star game coming up this weekend. And again,
didn't you pick Juan Soto, by the way? I'm not going to, you picked a Nationals player in the home run derby?
I did. I had this conversation with somebody earlier today, because we were talking about the Braves and their injuries. And he was like, man, if the Braves can't win it, I can't have the Mets win it. Like, I may have to start pulling for the Nationals. Like, hey, I'm with you. Anybody but the Mets, if it has to go that way. I'm not a huge Mets fan. But yeah, Juan Soto, I think he's got it in the bag. Not in the bag, but he's got it in his bag to go out there and pull this off tonight. He's my pick. I'm going to stick with it. I think Ohtani gets all the headlines and he'll put on a show, but I think Juan Soto will end up winning it.
I'm rooting for Salvador Perez, man. I think I picked Pete Alonso, but I want to see a catcher go out there and just hit a couple 450, represent catchers. So Salvador Perez, that's my day of pick. Keep an eye on him tonight.
Hey, got to get it for the catchers. He's a heck of a player on MLB The Show, by the way. So just throw that out there. I don't know what that's worth. You want me to start doing MLB The Show take every day, like who the hot players are?
Well, hold on. Didn't you tell us in the office that the other day you struck out 27 people in one of the video games you played?
No, 21, and I lost. That
Oh
was
boy.
yeah, that was some talent right there. Struck out 21 dudes and lost 2-1 on some nonsense. That's all I'm going to say about it. It only gets me angry, BJ. But I am the best, worst player online at MLB The Show. That's all I'll say. I lose more 2-1. I'm like the 2009 like Braves, where you just lose 2-1 all the time, 3-2, no explanation. It's rough. It's building character. I'll say that. It's 3 and out. We're coming right back. We're talking more Braves baseball all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Good to have you along here. 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett here on this Monday. Plenty to get to. Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com, will join us. Also, ESPN putting out their top 10 NFL quarterbacks list. And, well, some surprising omissions, some surprises in how they ranked out, and some head scratchers. We'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. But BJ, we're coming into the All-Star break. Braves on the flip side obviously have some decisions. I know you look at it on the surface, you're 4.5 out, right? You've lost Ronald Acuna. All three of your outfielders were not starting when the season began, and they probably would not start for a majority of other teams in the big leagues, just being honest. You have 2 backup catchers. So half of your starting 8 outside of the pitcher are guys who are filling in roles for guys who are either off the team or injured. Your starting rotation is without Mike Soroka. We'll see what this sore shoulder problem is with Ian Anderson, but if he has to miss some time, that's another hole you have to fill. Freddie Freeman's out there. Last year of his contract, obviously the Braves would like to extend him. I'm going to have you play Alex Anthopoulos, BJ. What is your mindset right now in regards to this Atlanta Braves team, knowing you have multiple holes to fill and you're not going to have your superstar till at least next season?
I think my mindset, and this may not be popular, but I think my mindset is to protect the integrity of my minor league system. And when you think about Major League Baseball, every year, right, the trade deadline seemingly kind of splits the teams in half. It's the teams that feel like they are contenders and they're going to acquire pieces, and the teams that feel like they're kind of out of the mix and they're going to essentially get rid of pieces at the major league level in return for minor league value. And I kind of think Atlanta is somewhere in between, and maybe that means they're nowhere. I've heard the phrase fire sale, or the term fire sale mentioned, where it's like, oh, you trade Freddie, you trade Ozzie, you trade Dansby, you trade Morton, you trade Luke Jack, and that's not what you want, okay? And Kevin, I think you used this phraseology last week. The Braves are not the Marlins, right? Where it's you trade pieces 4 or 5 years in a row, and then you get ready for one big run, and then you roster dump. The Atlanta Braves over the last 30 years have been one of the most consistent organizations in baseball. And within that consistency, there, of course, is going to be volatility. You're never going to have a team that wins 105 games every year. But I think if you're Atlanta, you feel like your future, meaning next year, the year after, is still one where you are a viable contender. And you look at your roster, hopefully, you absolutely wish Ronald the best. You assume you'll have him early next year. You're talking about Ozzie Albies. You're talking about Ian Anderson. You're talking about Max Fried. You're talking about Huascar Ynoa. You're talking about Austin Riley. A lot of young talent. And I think that you feel like, and Kevin, I know there's kind of this sense of impending doom on Twitter sometimes, but you feel like you're the favorite to re-sign Freddie Freeman, right? I mean, I think it would be somewhat of a surprise if the Braves and Freddie Freeman aren't able to extend the contract at the end of this year or sometime before the end of this year. So the core of your roster looks pretty strong moving forward. How you oftentimes maintain kind of that year-to-year optimism is by having a healthy minor league system. And what I'm worried about, and not that this means you can't do anything, but we've heard a lot of suggestion from folks and some good suggestions saying, hey, could you make a run at this player? Could you make a run at that player? Could you make a run at this player? Well, given that Ronald Acuna is out for the season, given that Mike Soroka is not coming back this year, given that we still haven't seen Huascar, given that you don't know what's happening at the catcher situation, given that Ian Anderson may be hurt, I don't think it's as simple as add 1 or 2 pieces. I think if Atlanta wants to feel like they are toe-to-toe with the Mets in terms of roster talent, you're going to have to make 3 or 4 trades. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but if you make 3 or 4 trades, you're probably giving away 4 or 5 of your top 10 to 12 prospects, and that's for a chance with some unknowns in terms of bringing in new guys. How are they going to mesh? How are they going to fit to compete with the Mets? I think if you're Alex Anthopoulos, you've got to protect and find a way to hold on to Drew Waters and Christian Pache and Jasil De La Cruz and Kyle Muller and Shea Langoliers, your top prospects, because that's how you maintain a healthy organization year in and year out. You got to be careful trying to chase the here and now. And I know there's a temptation. Hey, trade Drew Waters, pair Drew Waters with Kyle Wright and go out and get this player. Well, I think if you do that a couple of times, your farm system suddenly looks a lot different. So I'm not saying you can't add a reliever. I'm not saying you can't find the right deal where maybe you can bring in an outfield piece to try to remain consistent and competitive. But the idea of chasing the Mets right now as currently constituted worries me about what that may do to your minor league system and your sort of ability to be competitive year in and year out moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting case. Again, I think when you're talking about contending, you're talking about adding a piece to put you over the top. I think, quite frankly, BJ, you need to add 2 or 3 pieces at the very least. I know we had some comments early in the show saying, well, if you can get 2 outfielders, you should go do it. I mean, I think you're still talking about more than 2 outfielders to put you over the top. I mean, you need help in the starting pitching. You need a little bit of help in the bullpen, somebody that's coming to be consistent. And again, I like Jonathan Lucroy as a catcher, but is he your everyday starting catcher? Or is he better suited as a guy that can come in as a veteran bat and an every 5th day type catcher? I think that's probably more his role at this point. So I just look at this Braves team and say, look, you have a lot of holes to fill with a number of guys who are set to come back from injury heading into next season. To me, I think that's a big philosophical debate the Braves front office is having about, are we going after it or are we waiting?
Well, let me ask you this, because it's interesting when I hear you use that phraseology, and that's the phraseology. Are we going after it? And I guess I'm asking you and I'm asking everybody listening, and maybe it's more complex than this, but let's say the Braves add Joey Gallo, right, who's one of the big names out there. He's probably a 40 home run a year guy. He's probably going to have an on-base percentage up near 375, 380 with the walks. If you add Joey Gallo, are you making it to the World Series?
Not if that's your only move. No.
Well, but that's what I'm getting at. I think, and this is not to paint a pessimistic picture. I think you can find ways to be creative and see what happens. But to your point, if you add Joey Gallo and you add, let's say, a starting pitcher who's got an ERA somewhere in the 4s, which is probably what you're looking at, right? You're not likely to get a guy that's a Cy Young contender right now. You're going to get a guy that's probably somewhere in the 3.8 to kind of 4.8 range ERA-wise. To me, that doesn't make you a World Series contender, given all the holes on the roster. And I guess my question is, if you're trading away in order to get those 2 guys, hypothetically, 3 or 4 of your top prospects, is what you're getting back good enough to make you a viable contender? And if the answer is no, I guess my response to that would be, then what's the motivation? Like why make the move? I mean,
yeah, no, I get it, because it would all be perception based at that point, right? It's like, hey, we're not giving up on the season, and maybe that's an important thing to say. And I don't know that I'm giving up on the season. I think maybe if I'm Alex Anthopoulos, I come out of because this is going to be a tough stretch coming out of the break, right? If you play some competitive baseball and you could play 500 baseball coming out of the break, you might still be within 4.5, maybe 3.5 games of first at the trade deadline. And maybe that's a different story to say, hey, we've weathered it a little bit for a couple of weeks. Our bullpen has started to round into shape. Maybe we're not as dire there. We can focus on getting us a piece or 2, maybe 2 players to help us in the last 2 months of the season and see if we can't make a run at it. And again, I would think you're right. It's division or bust, because the wild card, you're kind of a ways back and you need a lot of people to lose in front of you. But if you think you could track down the Mets, I'm not opposed to making a move or 2 to try to see if you could do it, especially if you're that close. I mean, bailing on it a couple of games out is one thing. Again, after this 2 weeks, if you're 6-7 games out, maybe coming out of the All-Star break, I think differently about it, simply because there's so many holes you have to fill on this roster to try to get it to where you feel like you can consistently not just track down the Mets, but stay in front of them when you get there, that I don't know if I'm willing to give up the capital that it will take to pull some of those moves off. Again, I'm willing to see how this team plays coming out of the All-Star break for a little bit, and let that kind of be the determining factor as to how hard I'm going after a move, BJ. Because again, if you make a move and this team still falls flat, well, now you've potentially traded a couple of pieces away that you hope to have down the road. And I know people say, well, I'd rather take a player that can play right now. I get that. But I think with as many injuries as you have to be looking at 2022 as a realistically and say, look, we're going to have Acuna back. We hope to have Mike Soroka back. We can work the offseason to figure out what the deal with Marcell Ozuna is. We can see how it plays out with our young catching situation and address those needs in the offseason. And we still have a very good, very young core with Max Fried, Ian Anderson. Maybe you go out and get another veteran. And then you've had, again, the merry-go-round with Huascar Ynoa, Kyle Muller, guys who have kind of shown, hey, if you give me a shot, I can have some sticking power here at the big league level as a starting pitcher.
Well, and a couple of points you make there, I think are interesting, because I'm not saying don't make a move, because I think there's an element of truth to what you're saying about, hey, the team, could just benefit from a move just to kind of help the confidence. And if you can bring in a reliever or you can bring in an outfielder, I mean, keep in mind that there are a lot of guys that are available via trades. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Ketel Marte, the Joey Gallo blockbuster moves that are going to take, 2 or 3 of Christian Waters, Yasiel De La Cruz, Kyle Muller, one of your, Shea Langoliers. Like you said, I think sometimes there's a misconception when talking about potential trades that you're going to be able to get an all-star player for giving up like Dansby Swanson and a rookie pitcher that nobody's ever heard of. And sometimes you see head scratchers like that, but for the most part, you have to give up top-tier prospects to get a top-tier proven player. And that's what worries me. I'm not saying don't make a move. And maybe, the Braves have made some really impressive moves in terms of not having to give a whole lot up over the years. Maybe you could find a way to add a starting pitcher or a potential outfielder or a relief pitcher in order to just up the overall talent base. Even if you don't feel like you're going to win the division this year, you get a guy that has a couple of years on contract. He can be a part of the team for the near future, and you give this year's team a little bit of a boost. I'm not saying I'm not in favor of that. I think that would make sense, and you have to explore those options. What I'm worried about potentially is the big blockbuster deal where, right, you feel like you have to go get Joey Gallo, and I'm just throwing his name out because he's in the home run derby tonight and a lot of people know him, that, maybe you have to give up, Drew Waters, Yasiel De La Cruz and another prospect for Joey Gallo. And now all of a sudden your team's a little bit better, but not good enough to be a contender. And you gave up 2 of your top 5 prospects in a year where you probably weren't going to win the World Series anyway. That's the scenario that I would kind of wonder about. And that doesn't mean you say no to every deal. I'm just saying, as bad as this sounds, I think I would look at deals, go into potential deals, wanting to protect my top talent in the minor league level and understanding, especially if Ian Anderson's hurt, that it's going to take a lot. If we're just making predictions, you never know in baseball, but if you're making predictions, it's going to take a lot to potentially be the division champ again. And am I willing to give up somebody in my top 5, top 6, or top 7 in the minor league system to get a little closer to that? My gut tells me right now to not do that.
And we'll see what the Braves do. And again, All-Star Weekend, a chance to kind of sit back and evaluate. But Ronald Acuna, is done until next season with that ACL tear. And your lineup is kind of a shell of itself right now from where you started at the beginning of the season. We've got more to come. We're chatting with Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com. Georgia and Clemson going to kick off the college football season in a big way. He'll join us next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. College football coming up right around the corner. Of course, Georgia and Clemson. What a lot of folks are waiting on, BJ. We are efforting Will Vanderhort, the ClemsonInsider.com. We'll hope to chat with him here in just a little bit about Clemson and Georgia. But they just announced the ACC kickoff attendees coming up late next week. They're in Charlotte. 14 QBs coming, but not one from every team. Florida State sending 2, and I'm trying to think who else is sending 2. There's another. I'm trying to think of the team. We were joking about this pre-show, but Florida State sending 2 quarterbacks to the ACC kickoff. So not every team sending a starting quarterback. Some of them sending 2 there as well. But Clemson sending DJ Uiagalelei. I would imagine he will be the toast and talk of ACC kickoff, BJ, as he, of course, is stepping in for Trevor Lawrence, had the big show-out game against Notre Dame, and everybody expecting Clemson to be a top 2 or 3 team pretty much the entirety of the 2021 season.
Yeah, you'll have some star power at the quarterback position, right? With Sam Howell, De'Aaron King, DJ Uiagalelei, I believe Mackenzie Milton, just to name a few. So should be fun. But, yeah, look, Clemson is Clemson. This is a program that has made the college football playoff, I think, 7 years in a row. This type of opener is different for them. And I do think there's a little bit of pressure on Clemson not to validate their national standing or anything. I mean, Clemson is one of the clear dominant dynasties of this era, right alongside Alabama. But we've heard this with kind of projections surrounding Georgia, right? Georgia doesn't necessarily have to win this game, but if Georgia loses this game, they're going to have to win out the rest of the way. Now, the obvious implication there is not only do you have to make it through the SEC East and beat Florida and beat Missouri and then beat Auburn, in your crossover, and I think you have Arkansas as your other crossover, you're going to have to, or not Arkansas, you have, I'll have to double check off the top of my head, but you're going to have to find a way to win your SEC crossovers from the West, but you're going to have to beat Alabama, obviously, in the SEC championship game, assuming they're there. And that's really, really difficult, but there is an opportunity there that at least, I guess, comes with a second chance if you lose to Clemson, right? If you lose to Clemson, you have to win out. You have to beat Alabama. If you're Clemson and you lose this game, and I understand Clemson gets the benefit of the doubt. We all know that. But if you're Clemson and you lose this game, is there a chance you don't play another nationally ranked team until the ACC championship game? And even then, do you have a 2 or 3 loss North Carolina, or do you have a 1 loss North Carolina, a 1 loss Miami? I think in terms of needing the win for the resume for this season, even though Clemson is a program that is on a different level than Georgia, I think this Clemson team might need that opener a little more than Georgia, because if Georgia loses, they at least have the chance of a second signature win against Alabama or A&M or LSU, whoever in the SEC championship game. If Clemson loses, I'm not sure that second chance at a signature win is there. Now, do they need that? Is this a program that's beyond that? I think that's fair to ask. But the way I see it, I think NC State's going to be good. Now, does that mean top 20, top 15? I don't know. But in terms of the national kind of narrative, right, I don't know that there's another signature game for Clemson, and I think that puts some extra pressure on this one.
Yeah, it's going to be huge for them as well. And BJ, how do you see Clemson kind of coming out with DJ Uiagalelei? Is it what we saw at the Notre Dame game? Are they going to be a little more run-based with the running game? I know they lost Trevor Lawrence, obviously, but you also lost Travis Etienne, who was a generational talent at running back. How do you see kind of Clemson showing themselves on offense, knowing they've got not only a guy with a strong arm, but a guy that's basically a linebacker playing quarterback?
I think they're going to throw the ball, and my apologies, Georgia does play Arkansas as their second crossover, but I think they trust Uiagalelei. I think he's a guy that was absolutely extraordinary in that Notre Dame game. And I know some people will say, oh, well, you lost, right, but you lost in a game where you scored 40, and you lost in a game where he threw for 320 yards or whatever it was. This is a guy, rave reviews this offseason, big, strong, smart, mobile, can kind of do it all. And I think you're going to see Clemson try to force the issue, try to throw the ball. And don't forget this, Clemson did not have Justin Ross last year dealing with a neck injury that was, a very serious one. He looks like he's good to go. And Justin Ross, if healthy, is one of the 3 or 4 best wide receivers in the country. And you talk about a Clemson offense, and on paper, I don't know that it's a weakness, but there's at least some newness, some questions with Georgia's secondary. If you're Clemson, I think you feel like the strength of your offense is Uiagalelei to Justin Ross out wide and those playmaking opportunities on the perimeter. So to me, I think Clemson's going to attack Georgia downfield. And that's not to say they're going to totally ignore the ground game. But if you think back to even when Clemson had Etienne, right, they weren't running Travis Etienne 30 times a game. I mean, your general stat line for Travis Etienne was 14 or 15 carries, then 5 or 6 receptions. So I don't know that you're going to see Clemson turn and give the ball to one back 20 or 25 times a game, but I don't think that you've seen Clemson do that in recent years. This is a team, much like Georgia, that has multiple playmakers out wide, multiple playmakers in the backfield. I think you're going to see them balance that production out, but I also think you're going to see Uiagalelei really make a concerted effort to get the ball to Ross. And Justin Ross, you cannot stop him one-on-one. I'm sure he and Derion Kendrick have had great battles in practice at Clemson over the years. That may be the matchup to watch. In week 1 in Charlotte is Ross out wide against Derion Kendrick. I'm sure they'll be matched up some, former teammates, but I expect Clemson to throw the ball. I expect them to attack. I expect them to be aggressive. And I think if you're thinking this offense is going to take a major step backwards, regress, I think that'd be a mistake at this point, given the way they've recruited, given the scheme, and given the quarterback they have.
Yeah. And again, I think this is a team that has played with expectations, and they've kind of become very Alabama-like in that Dabo has upped the recruit. It used to be like the Clemson was winning, right? And they were like, well, we're getting like the 7th or 8th best recruiting class. We're not just up there pegging the number 1. They've been recruiting really, really well. And I think they've gotten to a point where guys are now waiting their turn to step in and play, BJ, and the guys that are finally getting their turn are just as good as the guys that stepped out of there at Clemson. I think that is kind of where you've seen Clemson slowly change over this run, is that, yeah, they're starting to get to the point where the 2 deep is getting littered with guys who are just great players. And there's not a whole lot of drop-off. A couple of years ago, we were talking, Clemson's entire starting defensive line was going to get drafted. And they're like, yeah, and all the backups will probably get drafted by the time it's over as well. That's the kind of depth that they're building. And again, that's going to be an interesting game week 1. If it's a loss for Clemson, is 11-1 still good enough in the regular season to get them in the playoff picture?
My gut tells me if Clemson loses this game, and let's say it's not necessarily like an all-time classic, I don't think any of us expect Clemson to get blown out, but just for sake of argument, let's say Clemson loses 30-20 or something like that, and it's not a game where you can point to it and say, hey, one play made the difference. I'm not sure that Clemson would control its own destiny. And you obviously completely respect Clemson as one of the leading programs, or the leading program right alongside Alabama this era in college football. But when you talk about comparing and contrasting resumes, again, I have it here in front of me, Clemson's schedule the rest of the way after Georgia: South Carolina State, Georgia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, FSU, Louisville, UConn, Wake Forest, and South Carolina. And you look at a couple of those teams that have good sort of name recognition. Georgia Tech's rebuilding, Florida State's rebuilding, Louisville's probably rebuilding, South Carolina's probably rebuilding. So you compare that to a resume of a one-loss Big Ten team, or perhaps an SEC West team that had one loss, didn't make the SEC championship. Who knows what's going to happen out of the Big 12? A lot of people think Southern Cal is going to be really good this year. Clemson is going to be in the conversation, clearly. But I do think it's fair to at least ask, Kevin, is 11-1 with a loss to Georgia, and maybe your best wins being NC State and Pitt, is that a resume, even for a powerhouse like Clemson, that will get the nod over a second SEC team, over a second Big Ten team? There have been rumors, could you have a second Big 12 team if Oklahoma and Iowa State both go undefeated? They don't play until the last weekend of the season. Who knows what Notre Dame's going to do? Who knows what Cincinnati's going to do? So I think you could at least wonder, might Clemson's schedule come back and get them a little bit if they lose to Georgia and it's not kind of a one play, a field goal type finish?
Right. And if they have a scare maybe in ACC play against a lesser opponent, if you will, some point during the regular season. That will be something to watch and how it affects the pollsters there as far as it relates to Clemson. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, including ESPN put out a top 10 quarterback list. Got some weird ones on there. Maybe some guys up there that shouldn't be, and maybe a few omissions as well. We'll break it down next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Well, BJ Bennett is a fan of lists. I think that goes without saying. You love a good list, right? At the end of the day, and ESPN has put out a list of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. They asked 50 league coaches and executives to rank the quarterbacks, and this is how it turned out. I will do the anti-Kevin thing, and I will start at the top because I think the top actually got it right, and then it gets weird after that. Pat Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, 1, 2, 3. No question. Russell Wilson, 4. Number 5, Josh Allen. Number 6, Matt Stafford. Number 7, Dak Prescott. Number 8, Lamar Jackson. Number 9, Justin Herbert. And number 10, Kyler Murray. Quite an interesting list there. What say you, BJ Bennett, after hearing that list, according to ESPN.com and their top 50 coaches and execs that they had to compile this with?
Yeah, my biggest question is, why is Lamar Jackson ranked 8th? I struggle with that. You're telling me Lamar Jackson is one spot better than Justin Herbert? I think that's a hard justification when Lamar Jackson has been in the playoffs multiple times, has an MVP, and has, statistically speaking, 2 seasons that are almost unparalleled in the history of the game. I mean, Lamar Jackson in 2 years and some change has 7,085 passing yards, 68 passing touchdowns compared to 18 interceptions, almost 3,000 rushing yards, and 19 more rushing touchdowns. I think Lamar Jackson should be 5th. And I kind of think what's happening to Lamar Jackson now is what happened to him in college, where he's so incredible so early, and you see, oh my gosh, he's got 30 touchdowns and 7 picks, and he's adding 1,500 yards rushing, that you kind of take for granted how dynamic and productive he is. And he has this season that no one's ever seen before. And obviously in college, that was his sophomore year at Louisville. He has the greatest season of all time statistically. Then when he comes back and is a little bit beneath that, people go, oh, well, see, he's not that good. Well, no, he still's better than anything we've ever seen. He's just not statistically quite what he was the year prior. And I think that's what we're seeing with Lamar Jackson, where he comes out and in his first full season as starter, he wins the MVP and has proficiency numbers that are off the charts and has the rushing production of a number 1 tailback. And we go, Lamar Jackson, he's incredible. And then he comes back the next year and maybe throws 1 or 2 more picks. Maybe doesn't have quite the completion percentage by 1 or 2 spots. And we look at it and go, yeah, he's really good, but we're going to drop it. What? Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback. You want to give me Mahomes ahead of him? Okay. Rodgers ahead of him? Okay. Brady? Okay. Russell Wilson? Probably. But Josh Allen, Matt Stafford, Dak Prescott, I cannot put ahead of Lamar Jackson. No, I can't justify that. He's 5th on my list.
Well, not only that, but I mean, again, I know you and I have debated, is Matt Ryan a top 10 quarterback, but you're going to put Matt Ryan, who's got an MVP, been consistent, behind Matt Stafford, who has yet to win a playoff game, behind Dak Prescott, who, I mean, he's a good player, but again, the Cowboys aren't exactly known recently for going deep into playoffs and putting together great. I mean, that to me is what you're kind of talking about with a list like this. You're like, so basically, where's Matt Ryan on this list compared to some of those guys? I mean, again, you look at, once you get past, really Josh Allen, you start looking around. Lamar Jackson's done it, but Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, I mean, like, they're kind of up and coming. They've had some good seasons, but I mean, Matt Ryan's got an MVP. He got a Super Bowl appearance consistently up until last year, but has consistently piloted some very good, successful football teams. Why is he not in the top 10 as opposed to some of these other teams? I mean, Matt Stafford, maybe it's just a Lions thing, but it's not really been a winning quarterback during his time at Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe it's like a projection, right? And instead of a reflection of what has been, kind of what we think might be. And you have Matt Ryan, who I believe is 35, I think, maybe 36, where Matt Ryan is. And maybe some people are saying, well, he's going to lose Julio Jones, so he's going to take a step back. But yeah, I'm with you. I can't put Justin Herbert over Matt Ryan, and I can't put Kyler Murray, although I would have Murray over Herbert. But I can't put Murray or Herbert over Matt Ryan. No, I couldn't do that.
Just want to jump in here. As it was explained to me by Christian on Second Down, this list was not necessarily, their projection based on team or anything around them. It was going into 2021, going into the 2021 season, just strictly quarterback, how good they are, period. So not necessarily their team or anything like that, but just how good their quarterback is.
I mean, nobody's questioning like Matt Stafford's talent. I still don't think he's a top 6 quarterback just on, I mean, if we're looking at straight ability, like if you had to start a team right now, would you take Matt Ryan or Matt Stafford?
Matt Ryan.
I mean, obviously, I think we know where you stand with Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson on pure ability is probably, I mean, top 5.
I would take Lamar Jackson over Matt Ryan.
He doesn't have the accolades of the Wilson, Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, which is understandable. But, would you take Lamar Jackson or Dak?
I would take Lamar Jackson.
Would you take Matt Ryan or Dak?
Close. Close. I might take Dak. Close.
I mean, if we're talking about just straight ability to go out, operate within a system, put up numbers, and get the job done, right? Is that what we're talking about, PJ? It's just, I mean, are you going to take Justin Herbert or Matt Ryan?
Dude.
Like that's what I'm saying. And so he's not even on the list. Like, does he get like classically disrespected around the league, being the quarterback of the Falcons?
I think maybe to a certain extent. I think some of it, and I understand I'm saying this with a guy number 3 who like is 42 years old or whatever, but he only eats kale and like mushroom milkshakes or whatever.
He is the exception to the rule, as you like to say.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady is like, it's just crazy what Tom Brady's doing. My only guess, and no, I would not have Matt Ryan behind Kyler Murray or Herbert. Stafford even, I think is a little surprising. My only guess, and I understand what you're saying, PJ, is maybe there's an anticipation for 2021 that he's kind of reached that mid-30s point where you start to take a step back, and whether it's with injuries or play. I mean, you've seen it a little bit with Roethlisberger. You've seen it a little bit, with quarterbacks just around the league when you turn 35, 36, 37. So maybe there's some of that. And I'm really high on Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. I don't want to be misconstrued that I don't think those guys are good players. But like you said, Matt Ryan has, some of the top passing milestones in the league in terms of first quarterback to this and that. You're talking about an MVP. You're talking about right there in the Super Bowl. You're talking about in the playoffs the last couple of years, a guy that has been pretty much a lock for 3,500 yards, 25, 30 touchdowns. So, yeah, I am a little bit surprised at that.
Yeah, as you said, he has hit a lot of the milestones for like fastest quarterback to X number of yards in a career. And again, it's just, I think he gets overlooked sometimes because of 28-3, in my estimation.
I mean, probably, and you hate that because, again, in that game, the Falcons scored enough points to win, right? Like, I know we all look at Atlanta and go, why didn't you run the ball? And who knows what the reality of that situation was. But Atlanta scored enough points to win. Matt Ryan played well enough to win. I mean, the bottom line is, not to revisit that nightmare and talk about that loss, but the bottom line is, right? I mean, Kevin, PJ, if you're still in if you're up 28-3 in any ball game, whether it's the Super Bowl, your college football opener, you expect to win that game. But to your point, Kevin, I mean, when you talk about the NFL and quarterbacks probably get more credit than they deserve sometimes, and they definitely get more blame than they deserve sometimes. And I think there are a lot of people who look at Matt Ryan, and even if the back of their mind is saying MVP, Super Bowl, 4,000 yards every year. I mean, look at what I think people will still say, yeah, but blew the Super Bowl, had it right there and didn't win the Super Bowl. And I don't know that that's fair. Again, I think some of this is kind of anticipatory in that maybe the coaches and executives are anticipating a little bit of a step back. But to me, to have Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray ahead of Matt Ryan is hard to understand. Even Matt Stafford, and I don't want to disrespect Matt Stafford's career because he has all of the milestones as well, right? I mean, Matt Stafford every year doing it without a running game, and there's the 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns. But Stafford doesn't have an MVP. He doesn't have the playoff success, and those things are hard to compare and contrast. Lists like these are difficult, but I am surprised not to see Matt Ryan, and I just don't understand the Lamar Jackson ranking.
I don't get it either. And again, that's the quick list of the ESPN's top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. And what is it about lists? If you've talked to BJ for like more than 5 minutes, he loves a good list. So why are you big in the list game? Like
Lists are hard, man. I mean, it's hard, because all of us speak when you talk about the best quarterbacks. You're going to say, oh, you got 3-4 guys. You got a couple of guys. When you actually have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's really hard. I mean, look at the college football rankings that are coming out, whether we're talking to Phil Steele or whoever. It's one thing to say, hey, I think Georgia and Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State and Oklahoma are right there. I think they're all really good. Well, yeah, we all do. Who's 1, who's 2, who's 3, who's 4, who's 5? That's where it gets a little difficult. Or like we did the other day. Hey, man, we all think Sam Howell's really good and Matt Corral and, DJ Uiagalelei and we all, De'Aaron King. We all have these, Grayson McCall, these quarterbacks that we love that we think are Kadon Slovis, that are big-time playmakers. All right, rank them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And whoever you're going to have, whatever list you have, somebody's not going to like. I mean, Kevin, you've known that. Every list you write, somebody reads it and goes, lost all credibility, don't know what they're talking about. So when you do a list, you're putting yourself out there. People aren't going to like it. You're probably not even going to like it. I mean, I've done tons of lists for as much as people write me and go, I don't like this. Well, I don't like it. I did the list and I'm not happy about it, but somebody's got to be 2, 3, 4, 5. Lists are tough. They're tough to do, but they're fun to talk about.
Yeah, we've got more to come here. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Monday. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, glad you are with us here on the show. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com. You can go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, our YouTube page, get a podcasted version of the show each and every day. But tonight, Home Run Derby tonight in Major League Baseball. Shohei Ohtani going to be certainly, BJ, the spotlight as he's in the Home Run Derby. I mean, this is quite the combination. Home Run Derby. He's going to start the All-Star game as a pitcher and DH and hit for the American League. I mean, if it's me, I'm putting him in the field for an inning just because. Like, just let the dude do everything and showcase him for a couple of innings while most of America can get a chance to watch him for a change.
Legendary what he's doing. I mean, we are seeing one of the greatest seasons in the history of Major League Baseball. You know, you mentioned it earlier. It's not only that he's doing things that people don't do. He's doing things that you get told, like, hey, you're not doing this. And he's so good, you can't stop from putting him at pitcher, letting him hit. So, yeah, it's extraordinary. And I think he's going to do big things tonight.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see how long he plays on Tuesday night. But if he wins the Home Run Derby tonight, BJ, wow, it's going to turn into like Ohtani Nation out there because dude already has a massive, massive baseball following with what he's able to do. You add home run champ on top of that, and then go out and maybe strike 2 or 3 guys out in your All-Star appearance. He's just going to become legendary overnight, and good for it, man. I like seeing things like that. It's definitely abnormal because, as you said, you get told not to do it. But it's proof that obviously there are guys who could be an elite pitcher and still provide at the plate. And I think you would see maybe some more of that if you actually pushed it. I know you're like, who wants to see a pitcher hit? Well, a lot of people do literally want to see Ohtani hit. And I think if you looked at pitchers especially in the National League, and said, look, you are a pitcher, but you are also a valuable piece. Max Fried walked off a game for the Braves because he can hit. I think if you just simply ask guys, not only can you pitch for us, but we want you to focus on taking some cuts, working on your at-bats in the cage. I think you would see the pitcher become a more valuable piece. Why don't guys hit? Because they're literally told by their coach, I don't care. Go stand up there, take 3 pitches, and go sit down. Like, that's the level of effort they want putting into pitchers hitting, and I think we would see more of that if teams cared about it a little more.
Well, and I think tonight with the Derby, you're not only looking to see how many Ohtani hits, but how far. I saw some people on, social media say, could it be 500 feet? I mean, might you see one that goes out of the stadium with this guy's strength, the timing, the fluidity of his swing? So keep an eye on not only how many home runs are hit, but do we see any moonshots tonight? Do we see home runs that leave the stadium tonight? Some of these guys like Ohtani have great swings.
Oh yeah, man, it's going to be awesome to watch this thing, especially in Denver, where people have talked about the balls leaving at a rapid rate there in the high altitude of Denver. Should be a lot of fun tonight. I think it kicks off. We'll have it for you starting at 8 p.m. This evening. Of course, the All-Star game tomorrow night. If you missed any of the show, again, ESPNCoastal.com, our YouTube page, get a podcasted version of the show, and hear our conversation with Jamie Bradford, the JB and Goldwire Show, and home team, Brandon Leak. We'll see you tomorrow, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.